Hey everyone, today I thought we'd look back at some of the things people miss about DBD. I asked my Discord members what they missed. I thought we'd go through them and discuss the different ideas raised. Let's get into it. Starting out, we have old maps and features. I felt a little nostalgic remembering some of these. Old Coldwind was mentioned a lot. Coldwind used to have a much darker setting, and the general atmosphere felt much creepier with the color palette and tone of the map. The other map that was mentioned, of course, was Hawkins, which was removed in 2021, after the Stranger Things license was lost. This map was great for its visuals mostly, and having some of the cooler Easter eggs that you can no longer see. Old Haddonfield was mentioned too, which was surprising. Part of me liked Old Haddonfield, with its weird boxy houses, and I have fond memories of the original houses. As one of the first DBD videos I made was an Easter egg video where I looked at the paintings inside the Haddonfield houses. Old RPD was also mentioned, which is a little more recent, being just last year. I get this one though too, and I think despite its many flaws, Old RPD was very different, and as a map as a whole, was very visually impressive. Old lighting in general was mentioned. I think this refers to when DBD was much darker, back in the earlier days, and generally felt much more atmospheric. Maps like Macmillan were much bluer too, and Autohaven had a different vibe. Old palettes were also mentioned. This one is a little more recent, or depends really. There's been a few different palette iterations, I believe. However, even more interestingly, one that came up was Old Grass. Back on the pre-rework maps, the grass was a bit different, and I think nowadays it's slightly less effective for hiding. Old God Loops were mentioned, with maps like Ironworks, and way back, Shack had 2 windows. Yeah, I don't miss those to be honest, but hey. Moving on, let's look at perks and add-ons now. There were a bunch of old versions of perks mentioned that we can speed through a bit here. A more recent one is Old Spine Chill and the Vault Speed build, that you've likely seen around. Not many people happen to cover it, so maybe you missed it. Spine Chill used to give an additional vault speed percentage when the killer looked at you, and it made it incredibly effective when paired with Resilience, the two of them giving 15% extra vault speed. It was also permanently active as long as they were looking your way within 36 meters. Old Metal of Man activated after taking 3 hits, not even protection hits, just 3 hits, and you'd get the perk. This meant you were pretty much guaranteed an activation during regular gameplay. 4 people running this, and it would be an insane amount of slowdown to the game. So many second chances. Old Dead Hard was as much a movement perk as it was to avoid damage. It allowed you to boost forward and negate all forms of damage for a brief duration. It also didn't apply endurance, it literally just made you invincible for the duration of the dash. It used to be a lot better as a distance and looping perk. Old DS could refer to lots of things. DS was silly. Old versions gave a 5-second stun, allowed you to work on generators whilst the perk was active, essentially making most killer games nightmares, as most survivors with DS would just instantly hop on a generator with little fear of repercussion. Old DS activated immediately on your first down, and to bypass it you'd need to repeatedly drop the survivor to reset the DS skill check, which was called DS Dribbling, which activated after a short duration. Crazy times. Old hexes were also mentioned, and I tend to agree with this one. I really miss hexes to be honest. People don't really run them anymore, and it's kind of a shame. I particularly miss the hex focus meta of 2020, and the huge controversy that came about when Undying was released. And Undying nowadays is just like dead. No one uses that perk. Old Iron Will is a bit more recent too, but it's a sad thing that happened to this perk. It used to be very meta, particularly when Spirit was in her prime, and with Strider pre-nerf. Old Iron Will made you silent, where now it makes you a little quieter. I really missed this perk. It was strong and felt like a much fairer meta perk, with its more passive effect. Old Balanced Landing refers to when it had its passive anti-stagger effect, whether exhausted or not. This allowed it to be paired up with other exhaustion perks, and made for some pretty deadly infinites. I miss it in the sense of utility, but definitely not in the sense of infinites. Old Frank's mixtape and stab wound study was also mentioned, which surprised me lots. This was pre-Legion rework, and together these add-ons allowed you to fully regress a survivor's mend bar, with one knocking off some time on the initial mend and the other progressively lowering it the more you hit them when in frenzy. It was an interesting add-on combination. Next up we have old powers. Old Death Slinger was mentioned, and this made me pretty nostalgic. Slinger used to have a much faster ADS speed, and his terror radius was also smaller, and you could exit your aim much faster too. He's much healthier now, but I do miss it a bit too. Old Doctor and Madness was mentioned. Old Madness used to just knock you down to tier 2 after you snapped out of it in tier 3. That was kinda broken. A Nurse's Cooling also used to count snapping out of it as a healing action, which made the perk very strong on Doctor. Old Choleraphobia 2, I believe, Doctor also had a bit of a different power. Whilst in shock mode, you were unable to attack, and you had to switch to punishment mode in order to use your weapon. It was a really weird ability, and I think it's good they changed it. Old Freddy was really cool, and I do miss it because it was pretty interesting. It allowed you to pull people into the dream world, where you were otherwise invisible, and it was generally just very different gameplay. I remember playing it a bit, it was fun. Out of the dream world, I believe you couldn't damage survivors. So I think they kind of removed that whole idea in general. Old visuals and sounds are another thing with lots of mentions. This one is mainly referring to the old feel of the game, where perks look different, status effects look different, the game was visually darker, and looked much more tonally sketchy, I guess. The horror aspect is definitely less nowadays. Old survivor models refers to the pre-Realm Beyond or reworked versions of certain characters. I think the general consensus is they did a much better job with the killers, but some people preferred the old look of the old survivors. Personally, I prefer the new stuff. Back in the pre-reworked version, we had Quinton as a goblin, and certain characters like Jake just looked very different. Old movement is one that was mentioned a bunch too. Movement used to be very different and made the game feel quite different because of that. It definitely looked less realistic, but it felt very fluid and it gave the game a certain feel that lots miss, I think. Original HUD was mentioned a ton too. This was the old visual look of the HUD that was much more simplistic but a bit more stylized and I think fitting for DBD's theme. I miss this one a bit too, not so much nowadays. Washing Machine Ghostface was mentioned as something people missed for whatever reason. This was after Ghosty's rework, where his chase music briefly was very loud and obnoxious to listen to. Lots of people compared it to the sound of a washing machine. Yup. Beta grab animations refer to the beta grab animations where survivors could be grabbed by the leg and pulled onto the killer's shoulder immediately. So grabs used to work the same way for windows and stuff as they currently do for lockers. The horror feeling was mentioned a lot in many different forms, as something that no longer exists. I've mentioned it a bit previously too. I do think DBD has lost this in many different ways. I don't think it was ever a straight horror game, but I do think it's less likely to be interpreted as one nowadays, compared to a couple years back even. Old generator animations were mentioned. Generators used to have not as much visual flair, they weren't as textured or detailed, and when you worked on them, they didn't have the little spark effect. Personally, I much prefer the new generators, but I understand the nostalgia for the old ones. At one point they had these crazy sounds too, where they sounded like car engines. It was super weird. Late 2020, early 2021 DBD was very strange. Retired features got a few mentions too. Bloodweb mystery boxes are something I didn't even realize were gone till I saw this comment, but apparently they are. These were little boxes you could unlock on Bloodwebs, and they'd do a little unlock animation, and a random item corresponding to the box's color would pop out. Konami Code was a secret Easter egg that was activatable on the home screen during the Silent Hill chapter. When inputting a code, a tune would play, and you'd receive a small Vic Viper charm. The quick play feature was an old feature that was accessible at the home screen, and it'd place you into a killer or a survivor game, whichever happened to be faster at the time. It got removed because apparently not enough people used it. I also missed the old custom game's name, which was Kill Your Friends, and also how you used to be able to switch to the character you were playing whenever you liked, even when when in a lobby, in a live game, and this was for both sides. So you know, quick nerf switch for certain teams. The Great Pyramid Head Cake nerf was a thing. Yup, old hook spam refers to when you were hooked, and you had to spam a singular button. You'd be in a Discord call playing the game, someone gets hooked, and as someone slams their space key. Skill check regression ruin is ruin's old version, which required you to hit great skill checks, otherwise the generator regressed. The skill checks were red and looked super cool, and ruin was silly powerful back then. I somewhat miss it. It was in every game, and it was pretty hard for most newer players, even experienced ones. I do miss it though. The 2018 winter event was mentioned specifically. I can't really speak to that as I didn't play then, but if you were there you might remember that one. I think it was one of their first major events though, where the home screen was changed and they added lots of stuff, and they added cosmetics and the winter firecrackers and stuff. Another event people might not even know existed is the summer events, or event I think singular. It was called Scorching Summer Barbecue, and the hooks turned into barbecue grills, and the generators were slushy or cocktail machines. That did look cool. I hope they bring it back one year. Yeah, that was a whole thing. Old Wiggle is one that I actually miss a lot too. I'm personally not a fan of the newer Wiggle, and wish they would have kept the option in to choose between still. The clicking of two buttons for me felt much more like you were doing a wiggle action over just pressing space. Finally, let's cover bugs and glitches. This one is fairly straightforward and they don't require too much explaining. Fogwise bug was recent but seems missed. I missed this one too. This allowed you to see undetectable killers when you activated the perk, which wasn't meant to happen. Space Billy is a big one. Through the years, in many iterations, you've been able to use Billy's speed and strange map angles to fling him into the air and fly about. Jiggly legs was a thing where you could make your legs jiggle about like this. Yeah. I remember this, I didn't realize they even removed it to be honest. Ghostface leak isn't a glitch, but I wasn't sure where to put it. I guess leaks in general are something you could miss. I know when Project W got leaked along with a bunch of other stuff, I was pretty hyped, and I have lots of nostalgia for that time too. The Ghostface leak was notably bad as I believe the update was uploaded early onto a PTB, a whole mid-chapter before it was meant to release. There's a bunch of cool stuff from it, and original concepts that didn't make it, like Ghosty using a flip phone in the Mori, and his original name being the Ghost and not the Ghostface. Random thought I just had whilst recording. When Keat was released, she had a really loud scream. That was a bug that had to be fixed. I don't know why I remember that one, but I do. Oh, and another one I'm also remembering while recording, going off script here a little bit. There was this bug for like ages where the hills on lots of maps, you could get like stuck in them. There was like a corner in all maps where you could get stuck in the hills, so there'd be games where survivors accidentally fell in them and they'd just be trapped for the rest of the match. I have fond memories of that for whatever reason. Chainsaw Myers refers to a very early days bug that caused a lot of chaos, where Myers was able to wield Billy's chainsaw. I think this was due to an issue where killers were able to drop their powers. I think they acted the same as items, so they could like place them down and have others pick them up. It was something like that. It looked really bugged and was very funny. Cosmetic glitching was also mentioned a lot. The ability to mix and match sets seems to be a thing of the past now. I personally miss being able to mix and match the Jill sets, which was only available for like a day I think before being changed. Hey, I'm sure this will come back though. It always seems to in some form. Alright, well that's gonna do it. Thank you for watching, and thanks again to everyone who took part. Let me know if there's anything that wasn't mentioned that you miss down below. Thanks, and goodbye.